Hi, this is Kara from the Special Needs Mom podcast.
And this is Angela from Especially Organized, Sensible Solutions for Special Needs Moms.
We have this heart for special needs moms. And so we thought, you know what, let's combine forces. And we have come up with what we're calling the Purge Party. And you can pretty much guess what it is. It's a party where we're going to come together and we're going to purge or, in general, accomplish a goal, a small goal together. So we have set this for January 27th, starting at 8 o'clock for my Pacific Coast people,
which means 11 o'clock for all of you on the East Coast. So this is an opportunity. If you have something on your to-do list that has just been stuck there and you are wanting to move it up on the list, you're wanting to tackle, maybe it's a space or an area of your home or a category in your home that has just needed a little time and attention. This is your opportunity for you to be online with us while you work and have access for us to help you answer your questions, help guide you, and just serve you for those 2 hours.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you can tell like what we've designed is just this very high level of support for that project that you just haven't been able to tackle on your own. The thing that we are envisioning is that you get to leave this purge party feeling so accomplished because you did the thing. You started the year off getting that thing done that you were stuck on last year. And so it's a momentum builder, if you will. You can go ahead and sign up. We have a link ready for you, and we are offering this for $40 for the whole experience.
Absolutely. And we hope you'll join us. I think it's going to be really fun. It's going to be a great group of moms of special needs kids. So we all get each other. We all have an understanding of what it's like to have something on our to-do list, but just we haven't been able to tackle it yet. So I hope that you will join us. We're super excited to bring this to you, and we are thrilled to work with you.
All right. We'll see you all there. Hello, and welcome back to the Special Needs Mom podcast. It's so good to be with you. I have to say, every time I sit down to record, I think I've said this a couple times, I just feel so connected to you guys, and I just feel so excited to be with you. And even when I'm preparing the episodes, I'm thinking of you, and I don't know, it is like I'm having a conversation, even though clearly it's one-sided. Today's episode is going to be somewhat of a, let me just sit and tell you what's going on in my life, but more like I'm sitting with a girlfriend at a coffee shop and kind of just sharing my experience, and hopefully you'll laugh a little bit at me, with me, but also connect with like, okay, it's not just you. And so I'm going to share all the nitty gritties, all the really embarrassing things I've thought or done this week, but also I'm going to share really the main point of this episode is giving you a really tangible example of what it looks like to shift from kind of being a victim or feeling like a victim. A victim says, I can't. They are the problem, and really feels stuck. Feels like you have no choices, to shifting into, I'm going to say the word power, like kind of found my power again. I also use the word a lot, shifting into responsibility. And that doesn't mean like you're a good citizen and you pay your bills on time. It really like a being of responsible says, how can I? Or maybe asks, how can I? Really doesn't point fingers and blame, but really is always looking for the what's next whenever they hit a roadblock or hurdle. So that's kind of what I mean about the shift in the experience. You're going to get to see a lot of me in the victim mentality, but I think I want to share both sides because I want you to see how I process the information and how truly human I am. Sometimes I'm with clients on calls and I'm like, I'm sure you don't do this, but I'm like, oh, you have no idea. The reason why I got into this work is because I needed it more than anybody else. I definitely feel like nobody needs to go think that I've got all this figured out, because I think you'll see from this that I don't. But I do have some tools, so that is helpful. Okay, if this is your first episode, let me kind of bring you into being up to date and current about kind of just the setting, the context for this conversation. So I have 4 children. Levi is my 12-year-old. He is a brain tumor survivor who has multiple special needs. He was diagnosed at the age of 2. I mentioned he's 12. Last August, late August, just like a month and a few weeks ago, he was diagnosed with a second brain tumor. So if you want to hear about that experience, go back a few in the episodes and you'll hear all about it. But I want to walk you through specifically my experience last week. Last Monday, I started the week knowing that I would likely receive a call that week giving me the date of my son's surgery. And I honestly had no idea what kind of timing they were looking at. I didn't know if it'd be like a week from that point or 2 months. I think if I could have guessed, I would have guessed like 3 or 4 weeks. So I got the date, which at that time was about just over 2 weeks from where I was. The date is October 14th, which is, oh my gosh, next Thursday. So it's coming in hot. So on Monday of last week, I'm getting this date and thinking I think it was towards the end of the day that I got the call. And so I go into frantic. I was going to say maybe that's a little intense. No, it's probably pretty frantic. Planning and calling and really trying to get all of the series of appointments in place. Really thinking that I would be able to kind of rest or feel more calm once that was done. That could be a whole nother coaching conversation, but that's not for today. I was also really focused on how I was going to plan my time off, had all sorts of kind of triggers that came up with that. Again, that could be a whole nother coaching conversation. We'll leave that off. But then Tuesday comes and my whole day, minus I think a couple breaks to serve clients, was full of calls and coordination. And more specifically, wait times like you've never heard of. Well, you guys may have heard of it because you're in my world too. And so you know that the medical healthcare systems and structures have all been impacted by the pandemic and are short-staffed. So you're probably also experiencing the much longer than typical wait times to get appointments, which is one thing if you're doing like one here and there. But when you have multiple back-to-back coordination, I'm sure you can picture how this was becoming very frustrating for me. So one of the calls that I made was to schedule his MRI, which was requested to be 1 week prior to surgery. So that would have been the 7th. The first call I made, the gal told me, I'm sorry, we don't have any appointments until the end of October, which is, I'm sure you guys can do the math. It's 2 weeks after his surgery. So that clearly wouldn't work. And so I literally was like on the phone. I said, okay, so what are my options? It was silence. And so I was like, okay, I'll go ahead and I'll call my doctor back and see what they suggest. So I think that was another call I had to make. Interestingly enough, I made that call to the doctor, and then moments later, I got a call back from MRI saying, oop, we got an opening. It's for the 8th for like 5 or 6 o'clock at night. Now, that would have been fine, except for I also simultaneously was sending messages to my endocrinologist. I mean, I say mine, but clearly they're my son's endocrinologist who manages all of his medication, which is like, really important stuff. Said, hey, this is my thoughts on how to manage his medications at this time, given that I'll leave the details out, but morning MRI times is always what we go for because it makes managing his medications very easy. Evening makes it very complex. But I thought, okay, I can do this. But my endocrinologist was like, no, we need to advocate for him. I was like, okay, you go ahead and advocate. Okay. So I'm starting to develop, I'm sure you can even hear it as I talk about this. And I'm sure you're starting to feel your heart start to like beat a little harder too. And maybe even start to like be like, yeah, this is not right. So I'm starting to think to myself, I shouldn't have to do this. This shouldn't be so hard. These people, like globally, could be doing better. And this is a thought that I'm like cracking up at. I'm a VIP. I should be treated like royalty in the sense of like, I'm like this place's best customer. I'm like, oh my gosh. Am I really admitting this out loud? They should treat me. I mean, they should basically like drive up in a gold carriage and pick me up and like roll out a red carpet to schedule these appointments. I mean, I don't think I thought it that extreme. I'm kind of having fun with it. But I think you can hear the idea that like, this is unjust was really starting to go real strong towards the end of the day, Tuesday. And I ended the day thinking, oh my gosh, am I going to have to reschedule this whole thing to make sure that we can get him a safe slot for his MRI? So that gets us to end of day Tuesday. We go into Wednesday. Wednesday, I'm continuing calling and trying to coordinate things. Meanwhile, I also had to drive down to the hospital for an appointment we already had on the books for a specialist to see my son for something totally unrelated to the tumor, but related to his overall care. He had a toenail issue that we'd been waiting a month to get this appointment for. I noticed when I was down at the hospital that I was looking around at all the staff behind the desks like they were the enemy, like they were the problem. And so I wasn't in a great mood, to say the least. Coincidentally, the gal that was, we had the appointment with, she happened to be a PA to see my son, maybe wasn't the best fit for what we needed. Still to this day, I can't say whether she was actually being rude and condescending or I was just so mad. Probably a little bit of both. But regardless, the answers she was giving me were not the answers I wanted, and it made me even more mad. I was like, you guys, the system made me drive all the way down here. And I was like, I want my $10 in my head. I didn't say this to anybody. I want my $10 back. This appointment was a waste of time and money. You can see how I'm continuing down this road. I got to the point with this lady that I was so mad that I actually couldn't even talk because either it was going to be yelling at her or crying. And so I really just kind of glared at her above my mask. And I said, no comment. And she was like, this is awkward. And she was kind of like, anyhow, at that point, I was like, I just have to get out of here. Because ultimately, I thought we were going to do a procedure on my son to help him. She didn't want to do it. She didn't think it was right. Ultimately, I was like, okay, I'm willing to accept what you're saying because I love the idea of my son not having to be in pain. And so I'm willing to try what you're recommending was kind of the thing I was thinking about. But I was like, I just want to get out of here. Okay, building. You're hearing what's happening for me. One of the visions I had was, this is where I was going. I had a vision of myself being escorted out of the facility in handcuffs by the security people. I don't even know if the security people have handcuffs, but this is kind of how I'm feeling, like what I want to do based on how I'm feeling. I wanted to essentially I wanted to make a scene. I wanted to be heard. I wanted to definitely fix what I thought the problem was, which was all of these people not doing what I wanted them to do. Okay. Now, to recap, the place that my brain was really going was they're all out to get me and I'm going to have to fight to get what I want. Basically, the only options I saw ahead of me was to be a total B and to basically yell and scream and the cuffs kind of explain what I thought I was going to have to do to turn this around. So notice also how it was globalizing. It was like everybody was the problem, even though probably in reality, I had a couple instances that didn't go very well. Notice also how powerless I was feeling. So that's end of day Wednesday. Now enter Thursday morning. Even though I keep my phone outside of my room, somehow managed to get that thing in the morning and be scrolling and Instagram caught me. It got me because I saw one of my friends post about the hospital where my son's having surgery, essentially firing all of the nurses that weren't going to comply with the new vaccine policy. So now I'm thinking, oh my gosh, my son's not going to get the care that he needs. This is a problem. And so I'm thinking, do I need to cancel the surgery? I'm thinking I'm going to like message my insiders, people I know that are nurses there, so I can get insight on all of that. So this is now like, I mean, you see, this is like a self-propelling fire where it's like, it's actually creating its own weather because it's so really fuming is actually a really great word for this. So at this point, I knew that things were not going well. I mean, I'm sure that doesn't take a lot of insight to see like this was not going well for me. I was feeling so out of control and really just so upset and so powerless. At this point, I reached out for help because part of my support team is having a coach on call for this season of my life. It's where I can basically reach out, say 911, I need you now. And we're scheduling a session to work through it. So I knew there was an opportunity to shift. I was able to see that, but I really wasn't able to let go of the feeling of anger and just upsetness of what was happening. Because I feel like at that point, it felt like all I had. It felt like the only thing that I had going for me that had me connect to the actual experience of being in control that I wanted. I didn't want to feel so powerless. I really wanted to just cling to this anger. So here's what I was able to shift. The first thing that I became aware of, and this is through a conversation with a coach. So I'm getting outside of my head, which is clearly, I think it's easy to see, it was not feeding me good information at this point. So I got outside of my own head. Essentially, I verbally vomited basically all that I just told you and kind of like prove my case to this coach and to kind of say, this is what I'm working with. Like, this is what's happening for me. These are my thoughts. These are my feelings. This is what I really hate. I was able to hear the idea that focusing on the anger and the frustration and like all of them outside of me was a total distraction from feelings that ultimately I was kind of afraid to feel. Or I would even say that were more vulnerable for me to feel. For me, anger doesn't really feel vulnerable. It feels more like control, but not a good kind. When I was reflecting on what I actually might be avoiding feeling, easily what came up is fear, out of control, vulnerability, man. If you think about the level of vulnerability that's required to submit your child to the hands of surgeons, I mean, that's pretty vulnerable, right? It really exposes some potential really painful emotions. They're not guaranteed, obviously, but like the potential of them being there is what makes it for me so vulnerable. I'm realizing, okay, yeah. So I'm using this anger to fuel and distract me and almost like grasp on to like this thing that I think is giving me control, but it's actually not. And ultimately, there was a need my heart had, but I wasn't able to access it because this rage was so loud. It was like blocking out what was actually there that needed to be felt, that needed to be seen and honored. So the question I contemplated is, if I didn't give my heart the anger and rage, what might it need? And quickly for me, I was able to like connect, like, oh, it's like softness, love, compassion, to feel sad, to feel safe. And of course, the vulnerability I mentioned a little bit earlier. Ultimately, through what happened, through all the things Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday that I described to you, I felt like the only power I had wasn't being angry, because I knew ultimately I couldn't change anything about the long wait times on the calls, or obviously the circumstance of my son having surgery, or the lack of availability of appointments. Like, I ultimately couldn't control that. But the more and more energy that I invested in being angry, and like, it requires you to look for more and more things to stay angry, to kind of maintain that level of anger. And what I really wanted was to feel less out of control and less of a victim. I wanted to stop feeling so powerless. So part of this transition, kind of recovering my power in this, or the feeling of powerful, is accepting reality and letting it just be neutral. I'm going to give you some examples. So let's use the call wait times, for instance. So the simple circumstance that, like, if we just write down like the actual thing that happened, the call wait times were between 30 and 45 minutes with no opportunity to leave a message. So the initial thoughts I have about this: they shouldn't be this way. They should fix the system, even if they're short-staffed. They've got to find a better way. So I'm feeling more and more frustrated. So what I did actually is, like, I hung up and I was like, surely this can't be. And I called back. So I did it 3 times. I thought, surely this can't be. And I called back again. And so the ultimate result was I had to wait 3 times as long, because I was resisting the idea that, like, this just shouldn't be this way. And of course, I probably wasn't super nice when I get on the phone with them. And I definitely didn't enjoy any of it, because I'm just so annoyed the whole time, especially with the battery of questions that they actually ask you when you do get on the phone with them. Okay, so that's kind of what was happening for me. That's me thinking it shouldn't be this way. It's resisting what is. Like, the idea that call times shouldn't be this way, that's the story. That's my narrative. And that's actually what's creating my experience with it, which was quite negative, not the actual wait times. So the wait times of being 30 to 45 minutes, it actually doesn't have, it's a neutral thing. All it is the wait times being 30 to 45 minutes. It means nothing but what I make it mean. So as I kind of connected to the idea of kind of taking my power back, I recognized just accepting that this is what was happening, for me, shifted everything. It just allows the hospital to be exactly what it is, impacted by COVID. That's just the state of what's happening right now. I don't need to be mad about it. I just need to accept that that is what we're working with. The thoughts that I was now creating, the stories, was expect everything to take longer and plan for it. Or even a thought like, the calls should take exactly as long as they do. Right, so that leaves me feeling just kind of neutral, kind of like blank, like just a matter of fact almost, where you can see even how like it shifts the entire experience of this. So from that feeling of neutrality and even just acceptance, I would do things more like arrive early, or I would even just, instead of being upset the whole time while I'm on hold, I would say, okay, I'm going to be on hold for about 30 to 45 minutes. How can I maybe multitask, or what can I do during this wait time besides just starting to be more and more mad? And I think a result, like from this place of neutrality and planning for it to be exactly how it is that things go exactly how I plan. And that feels so much better to me. So based on my 2 different versions of the same situation, the same circumstance, I have an entirely different experience. I think the one thing that became so clear as I entered into the conversation with my coach was that I ultimately did not want to carry this anger on top of what I was already carrying. I knew it was just going to be hurtful. It was going to be in the way of the mission I had ahead of me. And so for me, shifting towards what I'm going to call the more feminine energy. So for me, how I experience my anger is just I don't know why I associate this to it, but more of a masculine energy, more of like a bulldog kind of thing. Versus for me, I think shifting into my vulnerable and feminine energy that is softer, that is kinder, like not just to other people, but is a lot kinder to myself, where it's soft. And I think sometimes I associate this part of me with not being as strong. But I think the thing that I'm most interested to experiment with is and actually my instinct is that I haven't even tapped into my like strength yet, because I've only really ever practiced the loud, like powerful, angry version. I mean, I clearly have practice in the other space, but not in this exact setting. When I shift into this energy, this more feminine, compassionate, vulnerable energy, I let go of the anger and accept the situation for what it is. I then am freed up to think about what I want to create for Levi, which is ultimately an experience of being safe and well cared for. And I also then am able to recognize, wait a second, like I won't let anything get in his way. I then was able to generate the kind of thoughts that had me think, oh, I can always figure this out. Even if I have to figure out how to do an IV and manage the machine, I can make sure that he gets the care that he needs. And then I really shifted towards trusting myself, trusting that I could do whatever is needed, like the IV machine, like I mentioned. I also decided that I could step completely away from the conversation about the drama of what's happening or not happening with the staff at the hospital. That I could just trust them to do their jobs. That if they needed to say, hey, we don't have the staff for you, that they would be reliable to do that. Trusting that these are professionals that are very well trained and all very well intended. And do you see how that completely takes away the responsibility that I have to like worry about it? It's like really, I kind of relate to it, like, oh, it's not my problem. Like, I'm not managing the hospital. It's actually not my problem. Now, I don't say this in a lack of caring for the people that are experiencing just these hard times. That's just another conversation. And right now, I'm actually intentionally stepping out of that conversation because I don't want to be in both conversations at one time. The only focus that I have right now is caring for my son. And clearly myself and all of my family. But clearly, in the context of this conversation, it's much around caring for my son. I also decided that I could partner with the staff because one of the concerns I had is, hey, they might be overworked and tired and like they're humans. But then I realized, I'm like, oh, guess what? Like I haven't been in their shoes for the last year and a half. I'm fresh. So I can come alongside them, be kind to them, encouraging, not kind of fan flames on any drama that might be existing for them, and have their back by checking everything and making sure that there aren't any mistakes. But not from an energy of, you guys are all against me, really from an energy of, I'm Levi's mom. This is my job. I also think about, like, it inspired me to think of, like, I have so many people in my network now that can advise me. And I have resources, like, beyond what I think I'll ever need. But sometimes it's fun to just think about that I have so many resources, because then it makes me feel like there's so many ways that this can go well. So I hope that you see how this conversation completely shifts the experience. Yet, interestingly, my experience from feeling completely like a victim and recovering kind of the experience that felt so much better happened within an hour. So nothing outside of me changed. It was really noticing the stories that were causing the friction, the anger, the frustration, the fear, and tending to my needs, tending to the heart that is scared, holding space for her, opening up the possibility of having it go differently, which really, for me, stems from trusting myself, trusting other people, and allowing space for vulnerability. Of course, I'm going to hold space that I'm going to get triggered again. And I'm probably going to get angry. I'm probably going to step back into that old narrative because it's very well practiced. But I have a plan. I have a plan. When that happens, I have people to reach out to. And I know that I can go back. I can maybe even listen to this podcast episode myself. But I know that there's other options. And I am so clear on what I want. And it's not to go in with anger, but it's to go into this with vulnerability. And like I mentioned, I'm going to be asking for a lot of help, which again is vulnerable. So that's kind of a wrap of my little story, a week in the life of a special needs mom. And I would love to hear how you related to it. If you think I'm a little extra and you're like laughing with me about the handcuff picture, I hope you are. I certainly had a good laugh with that. But next week is a special episode. I actually recorded it yesterday, and I'm going to leave it a mystery. It's a very special guest. It's a short episode, but it's a meaningful episode, to me at least. I want to put one other thing in here right before we wrap up. It's that I will be taking a couple weeks off. Don't worry. The podcast will go on. I am currently working to get all the episodes done so that you still have me in your ears throughout this whole time. Not just me, but like really amazing moms. I'm excited for the episodes that I have coming along. But I am going to be taking time up from the groups and the clients that I'm serving. But we're going to be back strong in November. I am so excited for what's come for Being Mom Together. The women that are in are just extraordinary. You know who you are, and I love you. And if you're thinking, if you even just thought, maybe I could use some more support, reach out so that you can get on the calendar so that you don't miss out. Okay, so that is a wrap. I hope you have seen yourself in my story and you ask yourself the questions, what might I be avoiding being with? What might I be trying to cover up through the first emotions of like anger or sadness? If you want help answering these questions, reach out to me. I am only a quick couple button clicks away, and it is my honor to support you. We will see you next time. One more thing before we officially wrap up this show. Sometimes when I'm listening to podcasts, I have the experience of wanting more. I'm listening at the very end thinking, I sure wish that episode didn't end. I invite you, if you feel in any way the same way, I invite you to the Special Needs Mom podcast community, which is a free group that I host on Facebook, where we as a community of fellow moms who listen to this podcast and are experiencing life in similar shoes, get to talk to one another, get to share stories, get to actually interact. I hope you'll consider joining. See you over there.